Hi, Rich Tehrani here. We're in the TMC newsroom. Thanks for watching. We're at CTIA 2010 in Las Vegas. On our program today is Mark Madden. He's a Regional Vice President of Energy Markets at Alcatel-Lucent. Mark, how are you?
Thanks. Hi, Rich. I'm well, thank you.
Welcome to the program. You're involved in the energy markets, an incumbent provider to many utilities. Not everyone would necessarily know about how your company plays. They may think in the utility markets, they may think that you're only in the communication space. Could you tell us more about that?
Sure. So yeah, we are kind of a well-kept secret in the utility business. We're certainly working on changing that.
Well, this is a good start.
Yeah. So yeah, we've been working with utilities for several decades now. You'll find a lot of our equipment in utilities today: microwave gear, multiplexers, TDM equipment. Certainly we have seeing a lot of demand right now for IP gear, IP MPLS gear, as well as end-to-end solutions for connecting things together. So, you know, we're seeing a lot of motion right now in the distribution system operator space. So a lot of people very interested in trying to understand, how can I collect meter data, how can I get to substations, how can I reach that recloser sitting on a pole in the middle of nowhere. And that's what Alcatel-Lucent provides for our utility customers, is that foundation that allows you to introduce ICT into the distribution grid in order to start realizing the smart grid.
Now, do you feel that utilities worldwide are comprehending just how much the communications industry can help them? Some other vendors that I speak with, they tell me that some of the utilities are not necessarily, they're not paying enough attention to what's been already created in the communication space, and they're thinking about reinventing the wheel. Are you seeing that there's enough collaboration between the traditional disparate industries?
Well, certainly there's a great deal of opportunity for more, and you know, it has historically been two separate industries with two very different sets of requirements. But now we're starting to see the requirements of both sort of merge together, and actually in many ways we're seeing a convergence of telecom and energy. Certainly as you start introducing more and more telecommunications into transmission and distribution operators just for their own internal use, or particularly in underserved areas of the United States, we are seeing utilities that are very much wanting to be providers in those underserved areas, either to provide services, triple play services that their customers don't currently have access to, or they may be subject to a single monopolistic provider, in which case they're trying to introduce some competition and lower prices. So we are seeing sort of a convergence of the utilities, but again, both for smart grid as well as, again, within munis and co-ops, the opportunity to provide services, broadband and video services that they didn't otherwise have.
Now, I know you're responsible for North and South America, but if you look out across the globe, are you seeing different trends in terms of smart grid growth in one area versus another?
Well, okay, so smart metering is, that application of smart grid is certainly leading the smart grid initiative across the planet. We're also seeing in certain areas, certainly Australia is doing a lot of work around the introduction of smart meters, moving towards time of use pricing. Denmark has a lot of activity around that, as well as renewables. There's a lot of introduction of distributed generation in Greece and in Denmark and in other places. Germany is making a lot of headway in that general direction. We're getting a lot of interest in things like our meter data management systems, as well as the communications underlying it. We are seeing more interest in the U.S. in private networks than we're seeing in other places, where carriers are looked at as more of the preferred path in Europe. In the U.S. we're seeing kind of a combination of both, a balance of public-private networks, with the carriers having a great deal of opportunity around the edges and around the meters, you know, maybe migrating into a home area network, but you know, more interest by the utility in controlling the core smart grid applications.
So we talked a lot about the products that you have in the industry, and obviously the experience that you have. If I'm a utility somewhere in the world looking for a way to quickly transition into smart grid in my area, what would be some of the reasons to call you?
Well, so we are a provider of mission critical networks. So we are in the business of providing networks that are more reliable than the grid itself. So our goal is, and as we all know, as we get more and more automation into the grid, the ability to communicate to the grid in order to be able to manage it is going to be fundamental to any recovery process associated with that. It's also critical that we keep those controls in place because we're going to be running the grid much hotter than before in order to avoid building new assets out. So where we have been building and providing equipment to the telephone industry for over 100 years, and we all don't have to go back very far to all our wired phones. Those always worked when the power didn't.
5 nines, right?
5 nines or better in our case. But in this case, what we're doing is we're going one step farther. So instead of it being carrier grade, where it's 5 nines reliability, we're having to go farther. It's 5 nines reliability with a power out. So you get your 7 minutes a year, but power outages don't count against. Power outages would count against that if you had that in a utility. So it's one step farther than a typical carrier grade network, and we're well positioned to do that. We've been doing it for 100 years.
Now, what about security?
Security, again, is a foundational focus for us. We make sure that all of our products are able to work within the SIP requirements for the U.S. We are working to help align security standards. We are one of the authors of the X.805 standard. We're working with various agencies to try and put some sanity around establishing standards for security for the grid. But fundamentally, we're looking at what the carriers went through back in the 60s with the first digitalization of the grid, of the phone networks, for example. So we are introducing technologies that the carriers had to start with 40 years ago.
Right.
And we're also going to find ourselves in a position here where we can learn from what happened there, but if we're not careful, we'll also trip over the same things they went through. So we don't want to we see the opportunity coming forward to end up with yet another little blue box or something else. People worry about the ubiquity of IP and the hacking tools available in IP. But fundamentally, any ubiquitous technology is exposed.
Absolutely.
So it's
it becomes a target, right?
It becomes the target.
It becomes worth hacking.
It becomes worth hacking. And once that occurs, which is not where the distribution grid was before, okay, now we're introducing network access points into everybody's home that are private, to everybody's 13-year-old with a lot of curiosity. Fundamentally, I believe that somebody is going to get hacked somewhere along the way, and it's not just foreign governments we need to be worrying about. So our solutions, we build that security into our solutions, and we make sure that it's there and available for the utility customer.
That's good to hear. Now we've got 30 seconds to wrap. Could you just give us one thought on where you're going in the future?
So we intend to keep building out our solutions and our partnerships. We are intending to be the preferred provider of telecommunications gears to the utility industry. We are working, certainly we were working with other green initiatives, so we see the work we're doing not only as contributing to sustainable energy, but within the utility, but we're also working on that on our own communications products, bringing our own communications products through our Green Touch into that modern world, so that even the networks themselves, the communications networks, are sustainable.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thanks a lot, Rich.
It was wonderful to meet you.
All right, you too. Thanks a lot.